lower my voice and make it scary. She says, Dad, don't do that. That scares me. But if you think about it, what is the scary part of the 3 little pigs and the big bad wolf? Who knows that story? Zach, do you know it? What is the scariest part of that story? What is the big bad wolf trying to do to the little pigs? Do you know? What is he trying to do? Eat them, right? He's trying to kill them. And I think that is one of the most scariest things as we go through life. And even Abraham, when he was going through life, he was called out of his father's house, and he went out to the middle of this country, and then there was a famine, and he was afraid he would die. He was afraid there was no food. So what did Abraham do? He went to Egypt where there was food. And down in Egypt, there was food, but there was also a king who wanted his wife. And he said, I'm afraid they will kill me for my wife. So what did Abraham do to keep him safe?
He said that his wife was his sister.
So did he lie? Is lying a good idea? Is that a good plan to keep us safe? It's not. But he was afraid they would kill him, right? So he came up with his own plan. So like the 3 little pigs, they didn't want to do the hard way. What did the first little pig make his house of? Something easy. Straw, actually. It's weaker than sticks. The second little pig made his house of sticks. So we tried to do the easy way about. When we go through school, should we cheat? Should we look on someone else's paper and write all the answers down? No, because that's the easy way, and we'll never learn the lesson ourselves. So as God was taking Abraham through this school of faith, we would say, guess how many years Abraham had to go through school before he passed his test? Well, let's see. Lige, you ready for this big tent? Okay, here, Abraham was called out of his father's house, and he was 75 years old when he left. Then he waited 25 years, and finally God gave him Isaac. So he was 100 years old when baby Isaac was born. Isaac grew to be a young, strong man, and then he grew some more, and we're not exactly sure how old Isaac was in Genesis 22, but my guess is anywhere from 15 to 35. I don't know exactly how, but he was old enough to carry a big pile of sticks and fire, so he wasn't just a young little boy like we imagine. He was pretty old, but just for math figures, I'm going to say he was 25 years old, just for easy figuring. So if he was out in the wilderness 25 years old when he had him, and now he's 25 years old, he had 50 years of schooling to come to this test. And he was about to do a big test that God was going to lay upon him. And he had a lot of study and preparation. He went through a lot of hard times to get to this place. Do you children think he's ready for this test? You think so? Let's see what the test is. The Bible starts off and says, after these things, God did tempt Abraham. And one day Abraham was out, and God called to Abraham. And Abraham said, here I am. He was willing. He was ready to do whatever God called him, whether it meant to move into another place, do whatever. But he had no idea what God was about to call him to do next. He said, take your son, thine only son, whom thou lovest, and go to a land, Moriah. And in that land, in that mountain, I want you to offer him up. What do you think went through Abraham's mind? Here he had waited all this time for a son to be born, and now he was healthy and big and strong, and God said, take him up on a mountain and kill him. The scariest thing that we're all afraid of, God said, do to your only son whom you love. I bet Abraham had a hard time sleeping, just like the three little pigs, knowing the big bad wolf was outside their door. Death was waiting, and Abraham had to carry it out. But it says Abraham rose early the next morning because he had been studying God. He knew everything God called him to do. If he did it the way God told him to do, everything would be okay. So he didn't understand why he had to do this, but he said, God, I'm going to follow you and do what you said. I know you told me to take my son up on a mountain. You said you would show me the mountain. And they journeyed for 3 days. And all of a sudden, big mountain came into place. And God said, yep, that mountain I want you to climb. And they came to the base of that mountain, all the way up, 3 days journey. And they had a couple servants with them. And he told them, leave the servants at the bottom of the mountain. And he says, let me get this right. He says, I and the lad will go yonder and worship and come again to you. So he had something, a plan, or he knew God had something that he said, we're going to go worship and we're going to come back. Now, God told him, go up on the mountain, offer him up for a burnt offer, sacrifice, not only kill him, but burn him up. But he said, we'll return. So he knew that God had something in mind. So let's see how it goes out. They went up on this tall mountain. And as they were going up, Isaac said, Dad, here's the fire. Here's the knife. Here's the wood. Here's the knife. We have fire. But where is that lamb that we're supposed to offer up? And I can just see Abraham put his hand over on his shoulder and said, Son, God will provide. He'll provide a lamb. And as they continued up the mountain, they came all the way up the top. And I don't know what his conversation was as they started building this altar. I'm sure Isaac started looking around and saying, Dad, I don't see a lamb. And as the conversation went on, as they built this altar, stone by stone, they built it. I'm sure Abraham told Isaac the story of how God spoke to him and said, Isaac, you are the lamb. You're the one that I'm supposed to offer up and kill on this altar. And Isaac didn't try to run away, just like Abraham didn't try to run away from God. He said, this is a test, and I don't understand it fully, but somehow God has promised that through your seed, all the earth will be blessed. And he helped Isaac understand that God has a perfect plan and that all we have to do is follow through. So Isaac, as far as we can read or not read, willingly laid on the altar, and Abraham took his sharp knife and he was going to follow through with the orders. And just as he raised up his knife to kill Isaac, God said in a voice, he said, Abraham, Abraham, do not lay your hand upon the child. But he said, because I know you were going to go through with this, he said, let's see. An angel called, and Abraham said, here I am. He said, for now I knoweth that you fear God, seeing that you did not withhold your only son from me. He said, now I know you love me more than your child because you were going to follow through with this. And he said, so Abraham now took his focus off of killing Isaac, and he looked up in the bushes, and guess what was caught in the thicket? There was a ram caught in the thicket. So now he took Isaac off of the offering, and he took the ram in its place, took it out of the thicket. Then they laid the ram on the altar, and Isaac could stand next to them, and they took that sharp knife, killed the ram, and the blood and the offering and the smoke went up to God. Now, can you children tell me what the difference is between a ram and a lamb? You know the difference?
A lamb is a baby sheep, and a ram is a
Exactly. So if we go back a chapter, God, when Abimelech took Abraham for his wife, God said, "Let him go, for he is a prophet." So Abimelech let him go because there were plagues that came on him. And he said, "We're going to go up the mountain, we'll return." So that was the first prophecy. The second prophecy that Abraham had said, God will provide a lamb. Well, that does not look like a lamb to me, right? A lamb's a lot smaller. So I think Abraham prophesied correctly, and I think there was a lamb going to come. Does anyone know what lamb Abraham would be talking about that would still come, that would still be on this same mountain, that would come to fulfill? Jesus. He is the lamb that takes away the sin of the world. And years later, on this same Mount Moriah, we would know it as Golgotha. The lamb who takes away the sin of the world was killed. There we see his blood takes away our sin. And with two other criminals side by side, Jesus, the one who had no sin, died for us. There's a lot of blood there because he had to sacrifice for it, be a sacrifice for us. So do you children see the exchange? See, we are guilty. God said we should die for our sins. And if we would have to lay on the altar, let's see if I can get my stuff straight here. I hid Isaac. There he is. Why did Isaac not have to die on this altar that day? What took his place? A ram. A ram took his place, and Isaac did not have to die. The wages of sin is death. We've all sinned. We should all have to hang on a cross and die. But who took our place on the cross? Jesus, exactly. Now, this story ends beautifully because Isaac could live because the ram took his place. We can live because Jesus took our place. Now, when I started telling Hadassah the scary story about the big bad wolf, she said, "Dad, I don't like that story. Tell me the story about the gingerbread man." I said, "That's even worse." I said, "Do you realize that big bad wolf's cousin, Red Fox, ate the gingerbread man and he died?" I said, "The three little pigs were safe. They were in a brick house. They were safe." But because I used my scary tone, she didn't like them. Then she said, "Dad, I don't like gingerbread man either. Can you tell me the story about baby Jesus?" That melted my heart. I said, now you're onto something, because Jesus, even though he died here in the story, death isn't that scary if we know how the story continues. The story of Isaac, now we know Isaac was alive. It's not that scary that God told him to offer him up. The story of Jesus, he came back after he died on the cross. He came back in his resurrected body, and the disciples seen him. So this is not the end of the story for Jesus. He is alive and well. And after the disciples seen him, guess what happened to Jesus? He went up into the sky. All the way up in the clouds he went. And as they seen him go up and up and up until he disappeared. And then two angels came and said, "Why are you guys looking up to heaven?" Because Jesus had now disappeared in the clouds. They said, "The same way you seen him go, he will return." So now that's why we're on earth waiting for Jesus to return. And so we, like Isaac, can rejoice that he died for us. We can rejoice right now that he died for us, and that now he can live inside of us, and we don't have to die that scary death and know that we'll end up in hell, end up in a scary place. So Ephesians 2:20 says that Jesus is like a solid rock. They said he is the chief cornerstone. He's the chief cornerstone, and if we build our house, we should build our house on him. So back to the story of the three little pigs. Which pig built his house with bricks and mortar and a lot of work? The third pig. He built his foundation right, and he built it. And when the big bad wolf came to blow that house in, could he do it? Nope. So Satan is always going to try and blow our house in. He's going to try and crumble us and make us afraid. But if Jesus lives in us and he's the chief cornerstone, meaning he's the strongest stone, can Satan blow us down, blow us away? Never. But we have to make sure we pay attention and have the right material, the right foundation inside of us so we can never get blown away. Does that make sense? All right. With that, you children are dismissed.